Welcome back to another Sunday study. I'm going to get right into it. We're going to talk a little bit about living a productive life for God. Today, I want to look at, or we can look at, a somewhat powerful and practical verse that is either overlooked or misunderstood. Paul's letter to the Thessalonians. In 1 Thessalonians chapter 4, verse 11, Paul gives a rather simple and profound set of instructions for living a godly life in a busy and quite often chaotic world. And he says, "In that ye study to be quiet, and to do your own business, and to work with your own hands, as we commanded you." Now, at first glance, this may seem like straightforward advice that people seem to overlook or don't want to listen to or understand. And there is a deeper meaning here that can transform how we live our daily lives as Christians. When we look at the part about studying to be quiet, the first command that Paul gives, when we hear the word study, we typically think of learning, reading, or researching, which I love to do. But in the context of this passage, study means to strive, make an effort, to endeavor. Paul is not simply telling us to be quiet for the sake of silence, but rather to live in such a way that we promote peace, calmness, and tranquility in our own lives and in the lives of others. Because in a world of noise, we just have noise everywhere, constant media, social media. We have endless distractions and too many conflicts. But Paul is urging us to work towards peace. Christians are called to be peacemakers. Jesus himself said in Matthew chapter 5, verse 9, "Blessed are the peacemakers." I keep saying peacemakers. Peacemakers. For they shall be called the children of God. To be quiet doesn't mean avoiding conversation or withdrawing from the world, but rather maintaining a peaceful demeanor, avoiding unnecessary drama, and being intentional about creating an atmosphere of peace to the best of our abilities around us. We have to ask ourselves, are we living a life that fosters peace? Are we creating calm in the home, in the workplace, in the community? Paul is reminding us to strive for peace and quiet in our lives. If we are truly following Christ, shouldn't we be agents of peace? Not going around stirring up strife or division? Next, Paul tells us, or at that point, tells the Thessalonians to do your own business. The phrase encourages personal responsibility, because we live in a society that often encourages us to focus on the affairs of others, to judge unrighteously, to gossip behind one's back, to be overly concerned with what other people are doing. But Paul is kind of telling us, mind your own business. If it ain't for you, then don't come involve yourself in it. If you don't know what's going on, don't pretend that you do. Paul is teaching the Thessalonians and us to focus on the tasks God has placed before them and us, instead of comparing ourselves to others or meddling in things that do not concern us. We should focus on our lives, getting it straight and right, our own spiritual growth, our own work, our own relationships. We are not called to be busybodies, but to be diligent in our own responsibilities. The Bible speaks strongly against meddling in others' affairs. In 1 Timothy 5:13, Paul warns against idle people who wander about from house to house, or perhaps from channel to channel on YouTube these days and Rumble and so forth. And not to be idle, tattlers, busybodies, speaking things which they ought not. We are not called to concern ourselves with the private matters of others that have nothing to do with us or we don't have full knowledge of, but to focus on living in a way that honors God. What are you focused on right now? Some of us are spending too much time worrying about everybody else, while we ourselves are failing, or you yourself are failing. Paul's advice is clear. Take care of your own responsibilities. And let others do the same for themselves. Help them when they need it. Exhort them because they need it. Don't kick them while they're down, because that ain't biblical. And are you cultivating your own life and calling? Or are you distracted by others or the affairs of others? Or are you being distracting? And then we get to work with your own hands. Finally, Paul says to work with your own hands. This is an obvious call to embrace the dignity of labor. Because in a world that often looks down on manual labor or the work of humble jobs, Paul reminds us that all work is valuable in God's eyes. So it doesn't matter if you're Walmart. It doesn't matter if you're the accountant or the nurse. It doesn't matter if you're McDonald's. It doesn't matter if you're in a warehouse somewhere driving a forklift or driving job. It doesn't matter, because all work is valuable in God's eyes. When you ain't working, well, you ain't valuable in God's eyes. In Paul's time, many people in the Roman world considered manual labor to be degrading. I bet you there's some people like that on YouTube out there, on the social media, who can't lower themselves to work. But Paul, who was a tent maker by trade, he embraced his work. He understood that working with one's hand or hands is not just a way to earn a living, but a means of serving God and others. In Colossians 3:23, Paul reminds us, "And whatsoever ye do, do it heartily, as to the Lord, and not unto men." Like I said before, whether you're a teacher, a doctor, or a construction worker, your work is significant. It's not what you do, it's who you do it for. Every task can be done as an offering to God. Are you taking pride in your work? Are you working diligently and with integrity? Whether your job is in the public eye or behind the scenes of something, it's valuable. It can be used for God's glory. Because currently, right now, where we are in a world that often undervalues work, remember, all work is sacred when done in the name of the Lord. When in First Thessalonians 4:11, Paul, when he gives us these three key principles for living, and they are principles that honor God. You strive for peace. You mind your business. Embrace the dignity of work. These principles may seem simple. They used to be. But when put into practice, they can literally transform our lives and our communities. Yeah, communities, even with unsaved people, because you could lead them to the Lord. Or you could be part of doing that. Imagine if every believer, right? Every Bible believing Christian lived a life characterized by peace, responsibility, and diligent work. How many more people could we help? We would reflect Christ to the world in profound ways. So we need to pray that God helps us to live in this way, striving, focusing, and working with our hands in a way that honors Him. We want to go through this verse, right? We want to break it down. And I'll start with the part that says, "And that ye study to be quiet." It means it's striving to endeavor. It's a deliberate effort to live peacefully and quietly. We're supposed to be avoiding unnecessary disruptions or disturbances. Bible-believing Christians are encouraged to live peaceful lives, as I said before, avoiding all the drama that's out there and all the unnecessary conflict that ain't needed. I want to get to the part where it says, "As we commanded you." Paul reminds the Thessalonians that these instructions are not his personal preferences. They're not his opinions, but are commandments that he has given them on behalf of the Lord. He is reinforcing that these are directives that should be followed because they are in alignment with the Christian teachings. They're not merely Paul's personal recommendations. They are spiritual imperatives for living a godly life. There's an emphasis here on being obedient to the teachings of the Bible because they reflect God's will. I'll make this quick and simple. In 1 Thessalonians 4:11 we were talking about, Paul encourages the Thessalonians, as we said, the believers at that time, and even now, to live a quiet, peaceful life. That doesn't mean Christian isolationism. Focusing on their own responsibilities, working hard, and being productive in their own lives. These principles are aligned, as we said before, with godly living, where each person is to strive for peace, avoid meddling in others' affairs, and take responsibility for their own work. The message is clear. Bible-believing Christians should aim for a life marked by humility, industriousness, and self-responsibility. I guess you can say the verse also underscores the most important biblical value that I find. Well, there's a lot of them, but hard work. If you don't work, you don't eat. Unless you're relying on someone else. You're not contributing. You're like a vacuum sucking the system dry. The biblical value of hard work and the importance of contributing to the well-being of society the society of other Christians without being a burden, unnecessary burden to others. Hard work is almost gone. So few involve themselves in it now. Everybody's taking money from somebody. Everybody claims they can't work. You don't understand. God does, and he ain't thrilled about it. These same unfortunate folks who can't seem to involve themselves respectfully in hard work with dignity and integrity often practice a form of Christian isolationism. I appreciate your time. I'm thankful for your time. And with that, I say God bless and have a beautiful week.